Peace and blessings. I'm Dr. Bobby Price, aka Dr. Holistic, and I show you how to heal naturally and holistically so that you don't have to settle for treatment. In today's video, we're going to talk about the major causes of blood clots that ultimately can lead to fatal strokes and heart attacks. Now, what inspired today's video is you probably recently saw in sports news a famous NBA player, Victor Wembanyama, who's only about 21, gets sidelined for the rest of the season, and they're only at the halfway mark because he had a clot in his shoulder. Okay, now this isn't an uncommon issue. We've seen this before with Chris Bosh in the NBA, who was part of that big three in Miami with LeBron and Dwayne Wade. It actually ended his career. Okay, blood clots. We've seen this also with Brandon Ingram, who played for the Pelicans in New Orleans. We've also seen this with John Singleton, the famous director of movies like Boys in the Hood and Poetic Justice. He died at age 51 as a result of an ischemic stroke and a brain bleed. We also seen this recently with Irv Gotti, who is a music legend and mogul, died recently. They didn't necessarily disclose what his cause of death was, but last year or a year ago, he had a stroke as a result of complications of diabetes. Okay, so died at age 54. Okay, and this is happening recently. So you're seeing a litany of not only famous people, but people like you and I, everyday people, who are having issues with blood clotting. And so I think it's important that we start to explore what is a blood clot and why is it becoming so prevalent. And to be honest with you, this is what started my health journey. Now, it was really high blood pressure, but I'm going to explain how high blood pressure can lead to an increased risk for clots. And I was working in the hospital and I was seeing people who were my age at the time, late 20s, who were having heart attacks and strokes as a result of blood clots and high blood pressure. So this is literally what scared me straight. And so I'm hoping that today's video will inspire you if you've gone to the doctor and had any of these causes or have any of these issues, that you'll address them so that, man, to be honest with you, I guarantee you that Irv Gotti, John Singleton, they had no idea. Okay, they probably knew that they had high blood pressure. They probably knew that they had diabetes, but they had no idea the moment before they had the heart attack or stroke that they were going to have the heart attack or stroke. So I'm saying that to say that you don't always get a second chance and you don't always get notification. All right, so that's hugely important. But let's get into what is a blood clot. Okay, so before I tell you what a blood clot is, it's important to understand that blood clots are a normal function of the body. They're actually part of our healing process. Okay, so if I got a cut or had an injury that caused a bleed, then blood clotting is actually necessary. Okay, if I don't have blood clotting factors in my body, then I'm just gonna bleed to death. Okay, so it's hugely important to understand that blood clots are actually part of our natural healing process, okay? It's only when the balance is tilted out of balance that we have issues, okay? So what is a blood clot? A blood clot is when you take blood components that are like platelets and fibrin, and they coagulate and clump together, okay? Now, something is causing that, and we'll get into that in just a second, but when they coagulate and clump together, they do this inside of veins and inside of arteries. Now, we have over 60,000 miles of blood vessels. That's like going around the world twice and still having 6,000 miles left, okay? So that's how much real estate of blood vessels we have within our bodies, all right? Now, when that blood clot forms from platelets and fibrin primarily, that happens inside of the veins and arteries. And when it does happen, that can happen in the lower leg in a deep vein, and we'll call that deep vein thrombosis, DVT, okay? Which is often characterized by you'll have a lot of pain and redness in the area, okay? But if that clot dislodges and goes to the lungs, for instance, it can cause what's called a pulmonary embolism, okay, or a PE. And then that person will have trouble breathing and ultimately could asphyxiate, like, perish as a result of not being able to breathe. Okay, so that could be fatal. Or it could go to the heart and end up in one of the arteries. And this could cause a heart attack. Okay, or it could go to the brain. Okay, in the case for John Singleton. Go to the brain, and depending on where in the brain, it will affect you in that area. Okay, so if it goes to what is called the frontal lobe, the front of the brain, okay, it could cause paralysis. Okay, so this is why you see people who will be paralyzed on one side of their body. All right, it could cause speech issues because that's where speech is, in the frontal lobe. It can cause cognition issues, your ability to actually function, in your brain. Okay, so you'll have disconnections in that way as well too. So it's just hugely important to understand that, when you're thinking about blood clots, this is a real issue. All right, it's a huge issue. And again, this is what literally sort of scared me straight, because I had high blood pressure, which is one I'm going to mention today. And I'm going to explain how high blood pressure can lead to blood clots. And I was seeing people my age at the time, late 20s, who were coming in the hospital with heart attacks and strokes and unfortunately not making it. And this is what woke me up and said, I need to get my life together, because I'm pretty sure that this 28-year-old or 30-year-old or 40-year-old or 50-year-old had no idea the day that they woke up that it was going to be their last day. So it literally is what started my health journey. So I hope that what I explained today gives you a little bit of idea of not only, what could be the cause of these things, but this is also a wake-up call that if you have any of these, then you're at a potential risk for something that, honestly, when you think about it, is in the top one causes of why people die. It's one of the number one causes of why people die. I mean, it is the number one cause. When you think about cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and stroke, it's the number one cause of why people pass away. Okay, so this isn't just for old people. This is for everybody. All right, hugely important. All right, so let's get into it. Number one potential cause of why you could have a blood clot is medications. Medications like hormone replacement therapy, both for men and women, but also birth control. All right, if you look at the package insert on these drugs, or when you're getting counseled, this is one of the things that either the doctor or the pharmacist should be telling you, is that this is a potential risk. And if you have other potential risk factors that I'm going to name after this means that when you add this medication on, you're increasing your risk exponentially. All right. So medications could be the cause. And again, most people think that birth control is absolutely harmless. But I think it's really important to consider these type of things, especially when you have things that run in your family, or you have pre-existing conditions and other things that I'm going to mention moving forward. All right, number 2, obesity. Okay, excess fat on the body. 75% of the American population is either overweight or obese. And most people think that having excess fat on their body is benign. It's not going to cause any real issues. All right. But that fat is causing a lot of issues. All right. Me, I was overweight by 50 pounds at one point. All right. And I was experiencing all of the side effects of being overweight as well, too. But I didn't know it. It got normalized. Okay. But it's important to know that when you have excess fat on your body, it is doing a lot of things that are actually increasing your risk for blood clots. Let me name some of them. It increases inflammation in the body. This is one of the things that actually could increase your risk for blood clots. Most people don't know that. Just simple inflammation in the body. But it also increases what is called fibrinogen levels. Okay? What did I say clots are primarily made of? Blood components. What are those blood components primarily that I mentioned? platelets and fibrin. So it increases fibrin levels, all right? Number two, it actually impairs what is called fibrinolysis, the ability to break down and break up fibrin, okay? So it impairs that ability, but it also impairs your ability to break down a clot as well too. So yes, like I said before, clots are a normal part of our healing process. But when you have additional fat on the body, in conjunction with other things that I'm going to mention, it actually damages your ability to actually break down the clots that you need to form to actually heal yourself in the case of a bleed or something to that nature, all right, or injury, all right? So hugely important, or you had a surgery, all right? Excess fat on the body also damages the blood vessel lining, so the lining of the blood vessel as well too, all right? So, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that also increases your risk for blood clots, and it also decreases what is called nitric oxide, okay? Nitric oxide is a blood vessel dilator, okay? So you can imagine if you're not able to dilate, the pressure is going to increase. Again, we'll talk about that just in a second, all right? So that's number two. Number three, smoking. Smoking increases your risk for blood clots as well too. I love it in other countries when you buy a pack of cigarettes, you have the like on the you look at the pack of cigarettes in like Jamaica, or you go to like Australia, other places, it will have like black lungs on it and say this increases your risk for cardiovascular disease, okay, that we're talking about now, cancer and everything else. I love that they do that, because then people have informed consent. They understand what they're getting themselves into. So number three, smoking. Number four, prolonged immobility. All right. Now, this immobility could be due to a sedentary lifestyle, meaning you spend most or all of your days sitting. All right. And this is true for most people. All right. People sit down when they're home. They sit down on their way to work. They sit down when they get to work. Most people are spending 22 to 23 hours a day sitting. Okay, so that's prolonged immobility, but also if you're bedridden for some reason. Also, if, let's say you're on a long flight. I think the last time I had to take a flight to Japan, it was like 14 hours. But it's not just if I took the flight, I'm going to definitely have a blood clot, but it's also if I have all of these other issues that I'm talking about, it increases my risk. All right, so that's hugely important as well too. Also, number five, injuries and surgeries, okay? Increase your risk for a potential blood clot as well too. We often see the potential after certain surgeries, so that's important too. So this could be related to a lot of athletes, because a lot of athletes get a lot of surgeries. I mean, they get surgeries as if it's like popping, ibuprofen, okay? Oh, I'm just gonna get a surgery. I mean, they're just that laissez-faire about getting surgeries, but it also increases your risk for blood clots, all right? Number six, chemotherapy, all right? That is used for cancer. Now, the reason you're probably asking yourself, you could have just put that in number one, medications. Well, in my opinion, chemo isn't really medication. It is toxic therapy, and it's chemical therapy. It's chemicals. That's why it's called chemo. And if you look up the history of chemo was born out of World War II when they used mustard gas, okay? When they were using mustard gas in warfare. And they noticed that people who were exposed to mustard gas, it lowered white blood cell count, okay? So that's why I separated the two, all right? Because even though like there's levels to everything. There's plant medicine, then there's pharmaceuticals, and then you got just pure chemistry. And in my opinion, this is pure chemistry. But one of the things about chemo is that it increases your risk of what are called VTEs, venous thromboembolism. But it increases your risk for what I mentioned before, DVTs as well too, deep vein thrombosis as well too. And these VTEs can end up in the legs, the arms, the pelvis, the thighs, Okay. And again, when these clots dislodge, this is when you're going to see the potential for strokes and heart attacks go up. All right. So chemotherapy could also increase your risk. So I just think it's important to understand that, not only from the sake of understanding what chemo is, but also understand that if you have other risk factors, that this is going to increase your risk exponentially. All right. The other thing that is more personal to me is high blood pressure. All right. Now, let me explain how high blood pressure could actually increase your risk for clots. All right. When the pressure is high in your blood vessels, all right, it could cause artery damage. Okay. All right. So just imagine a balloon. All right. No, let's imagine a tire, the tire on your car. All right. If I kept pumping the tire up and up and up and up, it's going to start to cause damage to the actual tire itself, in this case being the blood vessel. All right. As it causes this artery damage, but in this example I'm using is the tire, we have a natural mechanism on our body to actually patch up that damage that is caused. Okay. That patch is cholesterol. All right. So people look at cholesterol from a very negative standpoint, but when you get a damage, a tear in the lining of your arteries and your blood vessels, the body will send cholesterol there like a Band-Aid to patch it up. In this case being the tire, a patch. Now imagine if you do nothing about your high blood pressure, all right, and the pressure is steady there, all right, it's going to cause more damage. And guess where that damage is more likely to happen? Where it already occurred. So what happens is the body has to send another layer, and then another layer of patch, and then another layer of patch that we're calling cholesterol. All right, this layer is getting thicker and thicker because this area is already weak, okay, because of the initial damage. Now, eventually what could happen is that patch, that plaque, could rupture. I hate that they call it a plaque because it's really a Band-Aid, and a good Band-Aid that the body puts on to protect the blood vessels from losing pressure, but it actually ends up causing higher blood pressure. All right. So when this patch ruptures, all right, so imagine the tire and it has a patch on the inside, and then that patch comes off. All right. In our bodies is going to send a signal to say, hey, send more platelets and more fibrin to the area to help fix the rupture. All right. When it sends more platelets and more fibrin to the area, what did I say is the actual components of a blood clot? Platelets and fibrin. All right. And as this patch ruptures and comes off of the area, this is what could cause the actual blood clot. All right. In conjunction, but also what causes the sort of the blockage in blood flow as well too. All right. So it's just hugely important to understand. This is like, don't just look at high blood pressure like, oh, my pressure is high, because that's you typically don't have symptoms when it comes to high blood pressure, but that's also why they call it the silent assassin. Okay. So hugely important. This is why people with high blood pressure, when it's uncontrolled and not managed properly and you don't take care of your diet, this is why they ultimately, in a lot of cases, will end up having a stroke, okay, or a heart attack. Hugely important. So this is, again, what scared me straight and made me say, all right, I'm changing my diet. I'm doing detoxing. And this is what ultimately, normalized my blood pressure. And I was able to lose 50 pounds, okay? Number 8, your toxic diet, all right? People will look over this one and not make any connections between their diet and blood clots forming in their bodies, okay? But understand, most of the foods that people are eating is pure chemistry. And that chemistry often is filled with salt and sugar, okay, among other things. And that chemistry makes the blood more and more viscous, meaning makes the blood thicker and thicker and thicker. It increases inflammation. And I told you inflammation is one of the risk factors that increases your risk for blood clots. And also, as I mentioned before, I probably mentioned in other videos, is the fact that a diet that is very high in sugar, especially chemical sugar, because most of the sugar that they're making isn't natural sugar. That sugar is going to lead to what is called glycation, okay? Now, I'm gonna have to go to my next example and I'll explain what glycation is, because that glycation is a huge part of what's leading to the blood clots, all right? But again, your toxic diet is ultimately what's leading to number 9, which is diabetes. If you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, okay, 95% of the time is because A, your diet is toxic, and B, you are toxic. You're filled with the toxins that were in your diet. So A, you got to change your diet, but you also got to get the toxins out. But again, a diet that is laden with a lot of sugar is going to lead to diabetes, number 9. Okay, and what's the real issue with diabetes? Now, when it comes to diabetes, what most people don't know is that 80% of people with diabetes die as a result of complications of cardiovascular disease like a stroke, all right? But diabetes is literally an assassin, okay? It is one of the number one causes of amputation, is one of the number one causes of chronic kidney disease, people going on dialysis, is one of the number one causes of blindness. Okay, I can keep going down the list. Now, let me explain why. As I mentioned before in the previous example, glycation. What is glycation? Glycation is when sugars, okay, all of this excess sugar that is in your diet, all right, when these sugars become attached to proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, specifically proteins, all right, they glycate together, almost like a clot. All right, they stick together. All right. This glycation, when they start to stick together, they call these AGEs. AGEs are advanced glycation products. All right. AGEs, advanced glycation end products. Right. They age you. They make you look older than what you are. This is why when people have diabetes, you can look at their skin. They look aged. Okay, when somebody has especially uncontrolled diabetes, all right? So AGEs, which are simply sugars glycating with proteins, right? They age you. They increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. They increase your risk for cancer. But most importantly, they increase your risk for blood clots and strokes as well, too. Hugely important, all right? This is why, again, 80% of diabetics die as a result of cardiovascular disease, a heart attack, or a stroke. All right, so hugely important. All right, so get the sugar out of the diet. All right, number 10, deficiencies. All right, now you can have what's called a deficiency like protein C or protein S deficiency. These protein deficiencies are often hereditary. All right, now there are things that you can do around that, even when it's hereditary, but it's more rare to have a protein C and S deficiency. One of the deficiencies that a lot of people have is vitamin B12 deficiency, all right? That could lead to an increase in blood clots. Now, here's the thing about vitamin B12. And I think if a lot of doctors could be honest with themselves, they would agree with this. Most of the time, people associate vitamin B12 deficiency with people who are vegan, okay, who don't eat meat or animal products like myself. I can tell you, dispensing hundreds of thousands of medications in my time working in the hospital, okay, I can tell you with absolute certainty, and doctors can too, most of the prescriptions are people who are not vegan, okay? And it is a very common prescription to give out a vitamin B12 injection or tell a patient that their vitamin B12 levels are low. Okay, so like vitamin B12 is not an issue just with people who are vegan. So, and I want to make that distinction because most people don't even look at this deficiency. Okay, and it's causing a lot of your issues. And I have to do a separate video on that. But the reason why vitamin B12 deficiency increases your risk for clots is because it injures the blood vessels, which, of course, as you know, can increase your risk for stroke, given the example that I gave you with high blood pressure, okay? So deficiencies could actually cause your increase in blood clots as well, too. Number 11, The spike protein that many people receive as a result of getting the C19 jab, okay? And let me explain specifically, and I will put in the description below, below the connection between the jab and blood clots. And I will give you a link to both governmental agencies and also institutions. So this isn't something I created in my head. It just is what it is, all right? Again, once you look at the actual pharmaceutical package insert, that tells you the truth. The information that we get in the media quite often isn't displaying that truth. But the spike protein that is in that C19 jab causes an increase in blood clots. And we saw this. We saw the player for the Buffalo Bills, Hamblin, collapse on the field, had a heart attack. We saw LeBron James' son at the age of 17 have a heart attack while at practice, all right? We saw this increase in athletes having these issues, and it's been connected as well too, all right? And the reason why the spike protein increases your risk for blood clots is because it changes the soluble clotting proteins to insoluble microclots, okay? Let me help you understand what that means. Soluble means that it will break down. So if you've ever made a drink and put sugar in it and you stir it up, you'll notice that when you first put the sugar crystals into the drink, you can see the sugar crystals. You stir it up enough, you don't see them anymore. That's sort of the idea of soluble. It breaks down, okay? So the spike protein changes soluble clotting proteins, all right? So they're soluble, meaning they can break down, to insoluble micro clots. This is why they increase your risk for blood clotting, all right? So this is also why you've seen that exponential rise, quite possibly, when it comes to stroke and heart attacks as well too. So that is a huge one. And then the last bonus that I'll leave you with is hormonal imbalances, which I see commonly both in men and women. Women who have estrogen dominance, men who also have estrogen dominance, men who have very low testosterone levels. Hormonal imbalance could actually lead into increased risk for blood clots as well too. So hopefully this video has been educational to kind of help you understand what's causing this increase in blood clots, because again, the number one cause of death, a leading cause of death for Americans and people worldwide, is heart attacks and strokes. All right. So we can eliminate the number one cause of death for human beings essentially by decreasing our risk for clots. Then this is a huge shift, not only for us individually, but us as a human race as well too. So again, make sure you share this video. This is the kind of information that people need to have broken down for them so they can understand. And when people understand that, then they can make more informed decisions, and then they're more likely to make a decision that is going to be healthy for them as well too. So make sure you share the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.